Anti-government protests turned violent in Syria as government troops opened fire on crowds. Right now, reports say at least 76 have been killed.
President Obama is urging the Syrian government to change course, but will the U.S. be forced to intervene? Joining us is Jeremiah O'Keefe. He's the former White House advisor to Iraq, and he's joining us this morning. Jeremiah, nice to see you this morning.
Good morning.
If we hold Syria to the same metric that we hold Libya, why wouldn't the U.S. intervene? What's different?
You know, Secretary Gates gave a speech in the month of February at West Point in which he said that any president who would take us into another war would have to have his head examined. He was quoting MacArthur after the Second World War. We're far too deep as it is, and there's a better way to be handling this, but unfortunately this president, I'm afraid, is not up to the task of it.
Let's look at what the White House said yesterday. We call on President Assad to change course now and heed the calls of his own people, of its citizens, and we continue to oppose his continued destabilizing behavior more generally, including support for terrorism and terrorist support groups or terrorist groups. Jeremiah, how do you think that the White House is threading this needle as it looks at Admiral Mullen saying that we are in a possible stalemate in Libya? And how is it different, the Syrians firing on its own people, than the Libyans firing on their own people?
Let's backpedal a little bit here, okay? The president was far too late getting into the game in Libya, all right? Fact of the matter is, he doesn't have the type of personality, he doesn't have the understanding to deal with the evolving Arab Spring, as we're calling it, throughout the entire Middle East, Syria in particular right now. There was a time and a place during President Eisenhower, President Reagan, when a president would say, I want this taken care of, I want that problem solved, and it would be done. There's something that the United States needs to be considering here. Back in 1986, we had a chance to kill Gaddafi, but the Church Committee findings and the executive presidential order signed in 1976 prohibited the assassination of individuals. So now we're dropping bombs on tent sites, just in the last 24 hours here, killing a number of Gaddafi's men, but not himself, because we can't target him in particular. So I think the Congress needs to take a look at that executive order from '76 and reverse it.
So Americans can't stomach another intervention right now. The polls trending down, of course, for what's going on in Libya right now.
I agree.
But we all agree, though, that change has to come from within Damascus, the Syrian capital, not from outside. How do we then help that process? Is there anything we can do?
There is. Listen. Europe in 1848 had a revolution across the entire continent. States after states, the Italians, the Polish, the Swiss, the Germans, they had this incredible movement that lasted several years. It was ugly, it was horrible. That is what is occurring in the Middle East now. It's magnificent. But what we need to do is operating covertly, behind the scenes, okay, and providing the support that's necessary and getting the job done. We need to take a solid look at the Church Committee findings and the executive order that was signed by President Ford in 1976, prohibiting the assassination of bad guys. And we need to grow up and understand that the world is not Disneyland. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. And there are bad guys out there that need to be taken care of ahead of time, as in the case of Gaddafi.
All right, Jeremiah O'Keefe, we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thanks so much for your expertise.
And switching gears entirely, trouble for Lindsay Lohan.